Hello, I'm Michael Marsh. Welcome to the program that I set up a few years ago for the purpose of reestablishing constitutional government, first in Oregon and then in the United States. And both the Oregon Constitution and the United States Constitution are still on the books. And every elected official takes an oath at the beginning of their office term to uphold that Constitution. And not very many of them actually do. And that's why I have this program. And during the election season, I will have various candidates on. Some will be supporters of the Constitution, some will not. But the purpose is to inform the viewers. And today my guest is Sharon Durbin, who is the Libertarian candidate for Secretary of State. I am also a candidate for Secretary of State on the Constitution Party ticket. Sharon, why are you running for Secretary of State?
It's an office that's very important to the running of the state. It is not a policy-making position. It is an administrative position and needs to be looked at in that way. It is the department that runs the elections and audits the programs, and it is my firm belief that it should be a member of a party that is not one of the two major parties, because it tends to be too politicized if it is. And if there's a close run count in an election or in a bond or a measure that's being voted on by people, it is not only likely to be fair, but it is also more likely to be perceived as being fair if it is not one of the major parties that are running. I'm also in favor of changing the system we have right now, that the two major parties, the Republicans and Democrats, and now I believe the Independents, are having their primaries funded by the taxpayers of the state of Oregon. Every other primary that anyone wants to have is funded by the party, so that the two richest parties in the state are getting their primary funded out of our pockets and not out of their campaign chest, whereas in the Libertarian Party, we're still trying to drum up the money to pay the two people who loaned us money to run our very cheap party primary. We're still trying to pay for that.
Yeah. I decided to become a candidate, Bradavalkian, reason, and I've noticed that, as head of the Labor and Industries, he did a lot of arbitrary, unconstitutional fines, the most famous of which was a $135,000 fine to a couple that didn't want to make a wedding cake for a lesbian couple.
Yes.
I thought that was insane.
I would agree with you there. That is not something that is to be approved of. And while I am all in favor of people marrying whomever they wish, I'm also in favor of businessmen being able to refuse to do business, because the free market should take care of that. If the baker down the street refuses to make a wedding cake for homosexual couples, then the baker up the street needs to put a big sign in their window that says, "We make cakes for everyone, come here," because I would avoid the one and go to the other.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like in the Portland area, there's no baker that wouldn't have made that cake.
That I know of,
yeah,
but
I mean, most of them would.
And if I found out there was one, I wouldn't do business there if they wouldn't, because that's, you won't make cakes for black people. They always say, would you force a Jewish baker to bake a cake for a Nazi party? And the answer is no. I think any business should be able to refuse service to anyone they choose.
I agree.
So,
I believe that Avakian like you said, this is an administrative position,
Right.
Secretary of State, but I don't think he sees it that way. I think he wants to be a policy maker, and there are, like, the Secretary of State holds is the head of the corporate division,
Right.
and they could very easily go in there and really mess up with corporations. They're not supposed to, but
They could.
A lot of things he's done in the past are things he's not supposed to do.
Right, and the auditing portion, it's he's a Democrat, and there are a lot of programs out there that need to be properly audited, and both for performance and for financial reasons. And it looks better if somebody else is auditing them than a person whose programs they may well be. But yes, everything Avakian has said has been very policy oriented and not administrative oriented. And this is not a policy making position. And it is my opinion that it should not even be the second in line for the governorship. It should not be that political, because auditing and elections just cannot be that political, and it's too important of a job.
And you mentioned the auditing, and Avakian has said that he wants to audit businesses that do business with the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no problem with that. But with Avakian, is it going to be an honest audit, or is he going to sugarcoat the Democrat businesses and then crack down on other parties, Republican,
Well, and
Constitutionalist?
is it the responsibility to audit those who do business with the state, or is it the responsibility to audit the state?
It's actual duties are the state, not the
Yeah,
businesses.
and there are programs I want to see more information on, because there are issues out there. Apparently, the Secretary of State gets information regarding whistleblowers in various things, and I have already been contacted by people who want to know whether or not I would be looking into that issue, because apparently one of the things we're doing that's costing the state a lot of money is people who report what they consider to be abuses of either power or financial abuses are being fired. And then they're suing because it is illegal to fire whistleblowers. And then we're having to pay large settlements because we fired the whistleblower. There's something wrong there.
Oh, yeah.
And it's expensive, and it's expensive at the taxpayer's expense. A lot of libertarians say taxation is theft. Well, at the state we're in, we have to have tax, because we have to have some kind of government. You can't let everybody be ungoverned when you've got this many million people in your state. But you need to know what your taxes are going for, and going to pay settlements to people who shouldn't have been fired in the first place is not the highest and best use for the tax money. So we need to look into that. And for years, I've also had an issue with, I don't know, and this is the thing, I'm not going to fault the foster care system, because I don't know, but I'd like to look at the performance and financial auditing of the foster care system to see why every year we have to have a clothing drive to get foster children coats and shoes for school, when their foster parents are in fact being paid to take care of them. Are we not paying them enough? Or are the funds being misused? I have no idea, but it just seems it needs to be looked at.
If I run for the legislature instead of Secretary of State, one of my issues would be the whole child so-called, quote, protective agency, unquote. I don't think that should be at the state level, and they shouldn't be receiving federal funds either. They should be at the county level, where somebody's actually held accountable. You know, with the state and the feds, nobody's ever held accountable, and there is a lot of abuse in that system.
That's my understanding. And I, as a libertarian, I will say that I want as much government returned as close to the people as possible. Because it's one thing to have things in the federal system where if you disagree with what Congress is doing, see if you can get down there and talk to them about it. You may be able to reach your congressman, but your voice is not going to be heard.
Yeah.
If it's in the state legislature, it is possible you can come down here and speak before the legislature. Not as easily as you can before your city council
Yeah.
or your county council. I want things brought as close back to the people who are being ruled by these bodies as possible, because that's the only way people have anything to say about it, is if you can go down to your school board and say something. If you can go down to your city council and say to the mayor and the city council, what you're doing is flat wrong, and this is why, and be actually heard by somebody.
Yeah, I've been at rallies, a couple hundred people at the Capitol, and they just do what they please.
Mm-hmm.
You get 200 people showing up at a city council meeting
Mm-hmm.
or at a county commission meeting.
Yeah.
They're going to listen.
I was on the planning commission in Forest Grove, and we actually listened to people. And sometimes we agreed with what they said, and sometimes we had to tell them, but the law doesn't say that, so we're sorry we can't do that. But they got heard, so that when something went through, there was actually some idea that the opposing ideas had been heard.
Yeah.
And it's like with taxes. If you can see a return on your tax investment, you've got some idea that it worked. If you're just sending money off to some pot somewhere where it's all going to pay legal fees and stuff to fight a wrongful termination and to pay settlements, you're not happy with that tax, and you shouldn't be.
And one of the things I would definitely like to audit is the Attorney General's office. It's the largest law firm in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They decide, they're one of their jobs is to uphold, defend the votes of the people in court.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody doesn't like the way the people voted, they don't always do that. They lose on purpose, and then something comes up, and they'll say, "Well, we need to hire more lawyers." Why?
Are your lawyers that overworked? Well, it would be nice to know if they were overworked. What are they doing? That's the thing. If you're not in the system, which you and I are not yet, and heaven help us, we might be, we haven't had a chance to look at it closely, and the people of the state don't closely know what it's doing. All we know is that former attorneys, former people who have been Secretary of the State have actually come out and said that it should not be a major party. Both in Washington and Oregon, they have come out and specifically said that it should not be, even though they were, because it just doesn't look. I'm a retired lawyer, and when you become an attorney and you work in the government and things, you find out that one of the things they talk to you about is not only doing what is correct, but the appearance of impropriety is very important. You have to not only, Caesar's wife must be beyond reproach, and people who are counting the votes and overseeing the auditing must not only be proper, they must appear to the public to be proper. And that's where the minor parties need to step up to the plate and get these jobs.
That's, speaking of the election, that Secretary of State is in charge of elections.
Uh-huh.
And Kate Brown, who is now our governor, a couple of the bills that she passed were pushed through the legislature, give the appearance of corruption at the very least. Like one is, it used to be the law that at the end when the voters were gone at that last day, they were to destroy the ballots. Okay, they changed the law that they were able to hold on to the empty ballots until everything's certified. Not a good idea.
No, because somebody could steal the empty ballots and do
Yeah.
something with them. So yes, they should. The ballots that have been determined as not valid should be absolutely destroyed, or at least the empty ones,
Yeah,
not the ones that are not certified as valid because maybe the validity was incorrect. Those could be, in a recount, needed to look at again, as they did with the hanging chads, I seem to recall. But empty ones should be disposed of,
Yeah.
so that nothing can be altered on them and resubmitted. And I don't know if it was meant to be a corrupting thing, but then again, it leaves an opportunity.
yeah, and it does give that appearance, and you know,
And the appearance is what is more important to the voters, I think, because reality could be that it was never intended to do something wrong and that it was never misused. Does that make the voters feel more secure? No.
No.
It's like with the hacking of electronic voting machines. I don't like electronic voting machines because they can be hacked.
Oh, yeah.
Hell, if they can hack your car, they can hack your voting machines.
Yeah.
And we know that in the computerized world, if you can devise something, somebody can devise a way to break it.
oh yeah,
And my pen on my paper is at least something that is a lot harder to hack. And we need to be valid in those cases. And I mean, you and I have nothing much to argue about here. So if anybody wanted to see a good, solid fight, they came to the wrong program, because we both want. How do you feel, though, about the Oregon Constitution, where everybody wants to do things not by legislating, but by constitutional amendments? I don't like that somehow. It makes me hinky in the corners.
well, you know, the U.S. Constitution does say we have a right to petition our government for redress of grievances.
Yes, but to make every new law a constitutional amendment,
Yeah, they do that because,
because it's harder to change.
yeah, because the legislature overturns it. You know, they can overturn it if it's statutory.
I know,
yeah.
but somehow the Constitution to me should be a basic program,
Yeah,
whereas you can make a statute and somebody can determine it fails to meet the Constitution. But if every new law is a constitutional amendment, then how do you judge if that constitutional amendment was itself constitutional? I think it's just a convoluted system that's
yeah. And
bizarre, but then that's
what they
just
do,
my opinion.
Well, the problem is, you know, we have a one-party state right now. You know, for the last 30 years. You know,
Yeah, it
basically,
is.
and they pretty much do whatever they please. So if you don't like what they're doing, you know, about the only way you can challenge them is with the
Is
initiative.
an
Unfortunately, you know, and that's unfortunate. You know, and if the people of Oregon never wake up and decide they no longer want a one-party system, you know, that won't be quite so necessary.
Well, it's difficult with a one part, and I like initiatives, but I just don't think they should be constitutional amendments.
Yeah.
But we do have a very divided state. I mean, where I was in Eastern Oregon, it was a Republican, and I ran for Congress there. Greg Walden, 500 and some thousand votes. Sharon Durbin, 10,700 votes. And the Democrat got more than I did, but nowhere near Greg Walden. I think she got 70,000 something. And over here, Republicans are not likely to get it, even though sometimes they're the better choice. And I think we've gotten too fixated on party things. Right now, the Republicans nationally are having an issue because a lot of long-term Republicans refuse to support the new nominee, and other long-term Republicans are saying it's the party do or die. But maybe it's time for some of the major parties to split up too.
I've been in favor of that for a while.
Well, it's time for them to do that, because the left and right wings of every party are becoming more and more polarized. And in order to govern properly, you have to have people who are willing to find some middle ground. Because you can't say, I will, as the Republicans in Congress did, I will support nothing if Obama's in favor of it. Well, that's not what we hired them to do. Our government overall is forgetting the fact that when you and I are sitting here talking to the people who are watching us, we are saying, please hire us to do a job of work. We are not saying, please worship us as minor deities. When our Republicans and Democrats and senators and House representatives, both here in the state and in Washington, start realizing that they were hired to do work at some of the best pay rates for work in town.
Very.
I mean, hello,
At the national
Congress in Washington, where can you have a job that you could serve between 2 and 4 years and get paid for life? Oh my. Your retirement is vested after one. You're kidding. Can I have a job like that?
Yeah, really. Yeah,
Really?
we had one when I was younger.
Come on. Most of us had to work for 10, 15 years to get vested in our retirement programs. And these people are not gods of any kind. They are not entitled to rule us. They are asking for work.
Yeah. Of course, the best thing about Trump is the fact that the Bush wing of the Republican Party is supporting Hillary.
Well, what's
So it
interesting,
kind of makes you wonder if maybe he's onto something. Maybe he's a good guy.
we had good old Ross Perot. We all
Yeah.
remember Ross Perot. He had no chance of getting elected. But he came out here and said the one thing that I think is the most important thing to say, and I'm going to say it again. Voters, the government you've got is your fault.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, vote for somebody else. There was a muckraker back in Chicago, a newspaper reporter who chopped at the government a lot, who said one thing that has stuck with me since junior high when I read his autobiography. And that is, quite simply, if you don't like the people, what they're doing in government, vote them out. Doesn't matter who you vote in next time. If they don't make you happy, vote them out. Pretty soon they will get the idea that making the voters happy is what gives you job security.
Yeah.
Not just being an incumbent, that people just vote on incumbent. Change them out every time. If I get elected and I don't do what you want, vote for him next time. If he gets elected and doesn't do what you want, vote for me next time. Or the other guy, or the other guy. Don't keep clicking on the same thing and expecting them to change what they do. They will not change.
No, they haven't. And this is America. We have options. There's not just the Democrat
No,
and
voting
Republican
for the
Party.
other guy is voting for the lesser of two evils is voting for evil. Voting for the other guy is voting for the hope of change.
Yeah.
And then if they don't give you what you wanted, vote them out.
Yeah. Like, I could understand why people would vote for Obama the first time. I didn't, but I could understand it.
Yeah.
I did not understand that second vote.
I didn't vote for him, but I'll tell you something. Watching what the Congress did, I cannot in my heart say that the Republicans just refused to act on anything because he was a Democrat. I think, quite frankly, it was a totally racist thing, and they didn't vote on anything because they could have voted to do something different than what he wanted, But to just say I won't do a darn thing because you're the president, I'm sorry, it's because he's a black man. They did things for
I'll be honest.
other Democrats.
Every like what was 3,000-page bills that he's putting forward, I would vote against them. Because who's going to read these bills?
Well, let's put it this way. The Democrats put forward those bills.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. His bills, they were 3,000 pages
they're
long.
Not all his bills. They were the Democrat senators and Congress people's bills. And as he said about doing things, he says, if I'm doing it by presidential decree here, which, by the way, he did fewer of than any other president before him, which people don't like to take note of. But he says, then you do something about the problem. Just sitting there and refusing to act is not doing. We hired them to govern the country, not just refuse to do anything.
Personally, I think they need to start getting rid of laws instead of passing more. I mean, they've got way too many, both at the state and the federal
Well, what
level.
have they done with regulations? I think Washington State did it, I think. And another state has done it where they said if you're going to make a regulation, you must delete 2 for every one.
Yeah.
They found that worked. There's at least 2 dead laws for every one we can do.
Yeah, and regulations should have to go through, get the approval of the legislature because they're really laws. The legislature is supposed to be.
I personally think you can delete 2 for every one. And there are many things that are on the books that nobody bothers with. When I lived in Arizona, I for a time had a job, temporary job, writing tax rules. And one of the things we were doing was going through and making sure that they actually had something to do with real world.
Yeah.
But I discovered something when you're getting your introduction to the Department of Revenue, and I'm sorry to betray you Arizonans, but they said that a large number of the things that the businesses were forced to file, those quarterlies and whatevers that they had to file, they got put in a warehouse and were never even opened. Goes to show you, folks, what over-regulating and overruling things does. You need to audit things so that what you've got is a functional system.
And that's one of the things that I hope if I'm elected that I can look at these things and say, do we really need some of these regulations?
Well, that's what we both want to do, is make sure that the regulations we have are functional and actually are usable. Because if you send a business a stack of regulations this high, and they're forced to hire somebody just to read them on a regular basis, to know, and the changes that come out every month. I mean, I've had to file those change pages for these things. They send you these things and you go and you rip out the pages and you put in the... I did that full time for months in a law office.
And we are now out of time, and I'm thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for coming, and we've had a good time talking about what we think should be done.
Yes.
I hope one of us gets elected.
So do I.
Nice to meet you.